only Jackie Chan, global superstar, and he is signing all of these books. Are your hands tired?
No, tired, but I'm happy.
All right.
Yeah,
I'm
really,
so
really
happy
happy.
to hear that.
How do you feel?
Good. I'm excited. This is the first time I've done something like this before, a live signing.
Where do I want to go that I've never been? Oh, we're thinking about, not thinking, we're putting it in motion. I'm going to go to Indonesia on my irresponsible tour this year. I'm excited about that. I've never been. And there's been a heavy demand for me there. So we're going to go. We're going to go to Indonesia and I'm going to make people laugh in Indonesia. That's how I roll. How do you roll? I can't make this up. Wayne, you got your Indonesia pants? I decided it about a good 3 weeks ago. You'll see it on the schedule soon, so I suggest you go get your pants for Indonesia. Because you're not going to wear them stupid pants. Where do you think Indonesia is? India. Yes, we out.
So you can see that I'm signing it. This is not some machine scribbling my name. This is my actual human body scribbling my name. So, all right, there we go. First book, signed.
We have fans from all over who have written questions that they want to ask you.
Oh dear.
And they're also going to get signed copies of the book. We're so excited.
Yeah.
So you ready to jump into some questions?
Yes.
Hey, we're live at the live signing.
To my mind, the successful feeling at the end of a book is not that you have done everything you could with the book, but that you've scratched the surface.
So it was a wonderful, it was a wonderful experience and a wonderful discipline in storytelling.
I'm going to start signing right now. I guess I'll sign in red. You know, red. I'm a Delta. Red.
Can you guys see that? See, he's a little smudge right there. So if you see a little smudge, that means Charles jumped on the book as I was signing it.
I don't mind doing signings because people really love a signed copy of a book. I know I do. I will sometimes sign a book to myself.
You were only 7 weeks old and ABC really wanted to get the new host in that seat and get things going. And I said, but I'm breastfeeding. And by the way, that was at a point like in 1979, coming up on 1980, you really weren't even allowed to say breastfeeding on the air.
I feel like this is something we kind of all need right now.
My life changed after my leg was broken in 1985. My world changed. I had the world by the tail. I had every material thing you could possibly hope for going for you in your life. And then all of a sudden, bang, in one instance, it was gone.
The only thing that matters is the love you give and the love you allow yourself to receive.
I'm healthier than I've ever been, only because I got healthy when I was like 40.
Thank you so much.
Got it. Hi there. You probably recognize this guy. I'm Ned Rust. I'm his publisher, the James Patterson here, the #1 best-selling author in the world. And
Did you just make that up?
I did some research before I got here today.
We are doing my virtual live book signing.
Live book signing.
This is crazy.
More and more authors are doing this. I think it's so cool.
Signing some of the signed copies that you guys can get at premiercollectibles.com.
You're going to be signing these books live over the next 45 minutes.
Hey, what up, this is I'm watching myself. Look at that. I need to stop.
If you're OCD, how is this panic-inducing to you?
They're not
like all these.
They've got a bag.
Yeah.
They've got a bag.
I'm inspired by your success. What advice do you give someone who's never found his passion?
Hi, I'm Judge Janine Pirro. You probably heard of my book, Liars, Liberals, and Leakers. I may look like Greg Gutfeld, but I'm not. Actually, this is so exciting. My 8th book, The Gutfeld Monologues, is out. This is fantastic. If you haven't purchased it yet, you're dead to me. But you still have time to reanimate and become my best friend.
Biggest pet peeve?
Yeah.
Men that talk to me with spinach in their teeth.
What can I do while at work to help lower my stress and improve my health?
One musician do you most admire?
I love you all, and we'll talk again soon. Take care.
Bye.
Much love. See ya.
See you soon,
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
We'll see you around the world. Woo!
Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone here.
Bye, guys.
Say goodbye, Mary.
See you in the morning.
Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Live Signing. I'm Danny Valdez, and I'm so glad to welcome Editor-in-Chief of Breitbart, Alex Marlow, for the live signing of his book, Breaking the News, Exposing the Establishment Media's Hidden Deals and Secret Corruption. I'm so looking forward to this one. Alex, welcome, and how are you today?
Danny, it's great to meet you. You've gotten rave reviews from some of my friends and colleagues doing these things, so I'm thrilled to have you as the moderator.
Oh, do tell. Let's talk about that for a long time. No, I'm kidding. Oh, that's cool. Who, for example, what is there talks of this? I'm intrigued.
Oh yeah, the Sean Hannity live signing is the stuff of legend. It is. There's been a lot of chatter around the water coolers at some of these book joints.
Oh, the little guy from Nashville did it again. Well, for the next hour, Alex is going to be signing books and answering as many of your questions as possible. And for those who have just tuned in and have not yet purchased a book, you actually still have time to order an autographed copy of this sizzling looking book and submit a question to Alex. Really, when you order a book, there's a spot for you to ask him a question. If you order it in time, we'll actually get it on our iPad today and we'll ask him live. Just click over to premiercollectibles.com/Marlow to order your copy. Alex, this is great. You've got a great background. You've got a great looking book. Tell me, why did you write this book and why now?
It's a great question, and I think my answer has to do with sort of a general life philosophy that every once in a while I try to take on a new task, try to expand my horizons in some way. And as a media guy, naturally, a lot of those challenges are going to be about things that are in media and forms of expression, and particularly forms of expression, trying to entertain people while I package hard news for them. That is sort of the brand at Breitbart. It's what I've done on our front page, and it's what I do on a daily basis in the morning in SiriusXM Patriot with our radio show, Breitbart News Daily. And those things are coasting along. We have an incredibly popular front page that I'm blessed to edit, and we have a very popular radio show that I'm blessed to host. And it seemed like it was time to try something out. And I felt like it was my New Year's resolution in 2020, I was going to write a book. And I'd seen people write books. I'd read many books, and I thought, well, I think I could do it, but I don't know. And I just think it's a really good thing, particularly when you're someone like me who I've been very blessed, and I have a beautiful family, and I have a great job. And it's very easy to let yourself just stagnate a little bit. And it's hard to say I'm stagnating as editor of Breitbart, but it is, I did want to push myself. And I thought that there were enough ideas that could be expressed in book form that I couldn't express with just a canvas or a mosaic of headlines on a front page or an audio broadcast, and especially not in social media. A lot of this is a reaction to social media, where I'm not a big social media person. We're incredibly good at it at Breitbart, and I love that. And I snap a towel for all of our great social media people who are leaders in that regard. But I find it to it's becoming increasingly hostile and one-sided. And I thought for people who were interested in my ideas, this would be a great way to get it, and it'd be a great challenge for me to go through that process. So it really is all about that. I wanted to push myself, see if I could do it. And at the same time, I thought there were some ideas I could articulate best in a book versus those other mediums.
I love your subtitle, Exposing the Establishment Media's Hidden Deals and Secret Corruption. Are you referring to both liberal and conservative media?
So this one focuses more on liberal media and the establishment media, but my thesis is that a lot of people on the right, I think, get a little lazy in that they think the media is liberal, they've got a liberal filter, and they stop there. And they think that, oh, this is coming from a left of center perspective. I get it, it's a little spin. No, it's much deeper than that, more nuanced, and in many ways, much more nefarious than that. If you look into the Facebook board, the New York Times board, as I've done, then you see a who's who of our major corporations. You see a Obama-connected people. You see people in, a top Facebook executive. You see these things where there's this synergy between big business and big media. And you start thinking, wait a minute, maybe this isn't just a liberal conservative thing. Maybe this is a business deal. Maybe this is about the almighty dollar. Maybe this is about wealth and power. even more or at least as much as it's about some sort of a liberal perspective. Now, I'm not denying the media leans left, and the left-wing media, I do hit them hard throughout the book, but I am trying to expand people's scope. And here's a good example: NBC News. So people think of NBC News as sort of a liberal news outlet, but really, I want people to think of NBC News as an arm of NBC Comcast Universal, which is a major multinational conglomerate with vested interests on a number of topics with global implications. So every time they put up a story, in a way, they're putting the imprimatur of a global international media mega conglomerate. And that is beyond liberal and conservative. And I think that's something that people haven't thought of it that way. But I think when they read the book, they'll be totally convinced that's how it is.
So when you say that, do you mean that there is business happening behind the scenes? There are owners, there are people funding it, and that it transcends just reporting what's happening, but there actually is agendas from these corporations?
Sure, and I don't see how that couldn't be the case, even if it's subtle, even if it's not, you must cover X, Y way, or you must cover A, B way. I mean, maybe that's not how it is, and I'm sure, though it is that way, I'm sure some of the time. But I think it's more about the influence that is put on individuals who are covering the news from the top. And people, if you look at some of the investors into places like the New York Times and the Atlantic, and the Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos, literally world's richest man. Why is Jeff Bezos interested in owning the Washington Post? Do you think it's because he wanted to give people at the copy desk a raise and he's got the funds to do so? No, he wants influence. And that's why he's got it. It's so clear, and yet we don't think of it that way. And the right stops short. Just saying the media's liberal is stopping short. And this takes it, I think, to a better direction.
I see, yeah. Now, I have friends who are what would be considered hardcore conspiracy theorists. They actually hate that title because they say that, no, that is a title the elite media made up to do away with our questions. But they are, for lack of a better terms, conspiracy theorists. That group is somebody that I feel like I would say, hey, man, you should check this book out. You would like this book. But I fear that they would come back to me and say, no, there's another piece of corporate media. And even that, like, how can I present this book to them as like, hey, man, this is maybe a third take on this.
Yeah, so I think that there's it's not a conspiratorial book. I know that's not what you're suggesting, but I want to point out something that I'm really proud of in the book. And that is there's 1,200 endnotes in it. There is a 105 pages of source material. And virtually everything does not have source material is because it's original and appearing for the first time in the book. So I tried not to make a single claim that there wasn't a link to a respectable publication or citing court case or whatever it would be, or a legal document, whatever it might be, that backs up what I'm saying. And I try to keep as little opinion as possible, some just mostly for entertainment value and for emphasis, but it's not really an opinion thing. I'm really trying to connect dots. So I do think people who have a suspicion that there's something up with their news, that they're not getting the full picture from what appears on the page or on screen, I do think they'll get a lot out of it. But I do think the book it has those people in mind who are who consume establishment media and kind of take it at its word for the most part. I think maybe they get a couple things wrong here and there, but for the most part, they're trying their best to be accurate. I try to write in a language that those people will get as well. And I know the core readership is going to be people who read Breitbart and who get anti-establishment news. But I really hope people get establishment news, read it, and they'll see the filters that their stories are going through.
Yeah. I also know so many people who, well, like myself, for example, who've sort of checked out from the news. Like it's a source of extreme stress for me. And I'm sort of proud as I tell people that I haven't watched the news for about 10 years. And that's not an exaggeration. I feel amazing since I sort of left the news. And you know, this interview and sort of reading some of your book has caused me to go, you know, maybe there's some valid news out there, but I wonder what you would say to that. Like, should I watch the news at all? Do we need mainstream media? It seems like, I don't know, a stressful form of entertainment to me.
So it's such a great point, and so much of it is that. And if you go through my breakdown of the primetime MSNBC lineup, for example, you realize it really is a stressful form of entertainment. I mean, most of their favorite narratives throughout the Trump years turned out not to come to fruition. The Russian collusion hoax is unbelievable. For example, where I broke that down in a pretty extensive degree in the book, but the stuff that I cut from my first draft is probably another 50 pages on this topic. Is just I had beaten the dead horse, so to speak. But it is infotainment a lot of what you're seeing on TV, and it's not just people on the left who are doing that, but it's really everyone does to a degree. Though I'm partial to some of the right wing hosts a little more. But I am seeing a lot of people tune out and feel like they can't trust anyone. But I do think that if you start with independent media, if you're finding those blogs or those podcasts or those people who are on Patreon, who are on Substack, I think there's a lot of hope there. I think there's a lot of hope for the news, and there are genuinely curious people who are trying to sort out who is pulling the strings and how they're doing it. The problem is that these corporations understand that too, and they're trying to buy up as much real estate as they can. We saw it this week with just another mega deal with AT&T, Time Warner, CNN, Discovery. They're all under one umbrella, and that's so much real estate and so much power. And everyone in there, they've got money to spare, and you'd be not at all surprised at how quickly people start changing their viewpoints when big job opportunities open up for them.
Yeah. Well, several questions have come in, and by several, I mean way more than we may be able to get to. But are you ready to
That's
take
a good sign
from people who bought
I
your
would love
book?
to take questions.
Yeah. And by the way,
let's do
this is a legitimately autographed book. We include a certificate of authenticity with it. This isn't a rolled stamp from a press where he signed once. He actually has to do the hand cramping work of signing all these books. So it's a really special edition, and I think it's for our times. So let's go to Cody
Please buy enough so I get my hand cramping. That would be a pleasure. It'd be an honor. It would be an honor.
Cody from Virginia, who's actually running the country right now. Also have an extremely hard time believing that Biden legitimately won the election. It's a shame that the left has essentially made the right look like a bunch of conspiracy theorists.
Yeah, this comes up in the book in two occasions. First of all, who's running the country is a terrific question, because I think a lot of people have suspicion that Biden is not a one-man band. He is I think he does kind of wait for certain consensuses or consensi. Someone look that up for me. Kenny, could you help? Whatever it is, there's some sort of committee going on, and he's almost like he's a bit of a bellwether for where the Democrat Party is at any given moment, and that's kind of how he's making his decisions, and that's to be somewhat expected. But the people who think Kamala Harris is running the show, that's the one where I'm a little suspicious. I don't think she is. I think she's a voice in the room, but it's not like she's the shadow president. And I can't point to a name who I think is really the secret president. They tried to do this a lot during the Trump years, where they acted like, X, Y, or Z senior official was really the president. I don't know. I don't think that was true. I think Trump was called most of the shots, for good or for bad. And I think that I don't know what the deal is with Biden, but he's governed pretty much as a straightforward partisan Democrat. And most of his nuances, whether or not he'll give a sop to the hard left or whether or not he'll just be establishment Democrat. He's not compromising with the right at all. Even moderate Republicans are not really on board with him on anything. And he's gone pretty extreme on some of the places where he could compromise with Republicans. I'm thinking like infrastructure, for example. He definitely could have come up with a deal that Republicans were into, and he's kind of moved a little further left, thus the deal's not done. But that's interesting, and we'll keep an eye on it. But to the second part, having a hard time believing Biden won. Let me just clarify for the Soros-funded freaks who monitor this feed. Biden did win, so do not accuse me of saying he didn't. But there are some things that were very different in 2020 that I believe the right should work to ameliorate to make sure that they have a better shot going forward. And there are two big categories, and both get at least 20 or 30 pages of discussion in the book. And the first one is big tech. And I break down exactly how the Silicon Valley conglomerates, again, that's the theme, how they manipulated, I think, the voting base by boosting, deboosting, censoring information that would be helpful to Trump and not helpful to Biden. For example, Twitter and Facebook censoring the bombshell Hunter Biden scoops about his laptop, and accurate stories that were framed by the establishment press as Russian disinformation. They were neither Russian nor disinformation, and yet Facebook and Twitter used that as an excuse to censor the posts, and they basically cut all their muzzle velocity to zero. And then they waited until they sorted out, and this prevents things from going viral. It prevents virality. And that is the lifeblood of social media. As much as I resent social media, we're big users of it at Breitbart. And the lifeblood is virality. It's that initial boost. And that was completely cut down in its tracks. Google, for example, flipped a switch on May the 5th and turned off Breitbart's traffic to stories about Joe Biden. Now, Breitbart was one of the biggest on social media in terms of not just search, but on Facebook, et cetera, into 2016. And the algorithms were different in 2020, and we could see it from our own traffic patterns. And we did our best to try to create content that could get through the algorithm or beat the algorithm or be optimized for it. And still, we could not replicate what we did in 2016. And then you look at the chart, and I have two of these printed in the book. You see the traffic from Google to Breitbart on stories with Joe Biden, and it goes from kind of a rocky peaks to literally a flat line, zero for the rest of the election. And it goes to this, it's like that to this day. And you think overnight we just stopped writing about Joe Biden? Of course not. It was that we were clearly suppressed by Google. And you see, and a couple of Google execs come up in the book, and Eric Schmidt, who's a guy who was Google CEO, he consulted on hires for the Pentagon, and the Pentagon does a lot of contracts with Google. And I reached out to Schmidt's people and asked them about that, and they basically said, yeah, those stories are pretty much true. And it's amazing stuff that you would think that we should all be very uncomfortable with this stuff. This is one of the top guys at Google who's working with the Pentagon to pick people, while Google gets Pentagon contracts, and Google's traffic to accurate news stories is being manipulated clearly based on politics. And there's no accountability. And a lot of this is because the news is broken and they're not curious about these, what I think are fundamental questions. The other component to that in terms of election integrity. Now, I know some people on the right want this spy thriller-esque. There were these voting machines that were developed for Hugo Chavez, and they were bought by the Chinese, and they were placed in Germany, and they're flipping votes from Trump to Biden. I saw no evidence that was the case, and I dug into it. I didn't see any of that. So if you want that to be true, you're going to be disappointed. But I do think that, hopefully you'll trust that I'm not lying to you about it. But there were improprieties in terms of the rules that took place state by state. And I went through several of the swing states, and a lot of the details are in the book, and I want to be precise about it. So I want to encourage people to pick it up to get them all. But you see in a number of states that rules that were changed unnecessarily, ostensibly due to the coronavirus, COVID-19, that allowed for more mail-in ballots wildly hurt the Republicans. Now, that's not news, but I go through the specifics and whether or not those can be just turned around and reverse back to pre-pandemic era, which would be a huge benefit to the Republican Party. And you go through with the data and the specific changes. Again, we're getting a little too granular, I think, for the purpose of this signing, but that's why people should get the book. And you will see the blow by blow of what each state should do. And I know a lot of people are going to ask me, what should you do? What can we do? If you're in one of these swing states, especially if you have a Republican legislature, you should be making sure 100% that they are on top of this, and any changes that were made because of the pandemic. And let's not forget, there were no massive outbreaks from voting in person. So the changes weren't even necessary. These changes need to go back to where they were, or else Republicans are not going to be viable in a lot of elections going forward.
Let's go to Laser from Columbia, South Carolina. Alex, it seems like China owns our universities. They own Hollywood. They own our establishment media. They own much of our corporate real estate. They're trying to buy our communications and energy infrastructure. They've stolen our tech IP and military secrets. So my question is this: what don't they own? And more importantly, how do we correct this? Is it too late?
Well, they don't own me, Laser. They don't own me.
They don't own me that I know of.
Who knows? Yeah.
Did they tell me to say that?
Yeah. You know, it's a great point, and it's a distressing point because this is our chief geopolitical threat. Senator Blackburn was on my radio show, and she referred to China as part of the axis of evil, the new axis of evil. So if we have a senator for a state of Tennessee, not a red state, but not an ultra red state, willing to speak about them in those terms, it should jar people into thinking about what China is and what they do. They have literal concentration camps where they intern Muslims. They do organ harvesting. They are discriminate against Black people. There are restaurants where Black people cannot eat in China. Wow. And none of this is discussed in our establishment press at any major level. They're horrible polluters. They release the most of the greenhouse gases, whatever the things the Bloomberg says that he doesn't want released. They release the most of those, and then he praises them. So I bring up Bloomberg because the first big scoop from the book that we've up at Breitbart.com is these photos that I uncovered from Chinese propaganda outlets of Bloomberg people glad-handing with the Chinese. And these are their chief propaganda ministers. And I dug into why this is happening. And Bloomberg LP is a huge financial services business that has access to the Chinese market, one of only a few American outlets that have any access at all to the Chinese market, one of the biggest markets in the world. And they're up for renewal every 24 months. And the group that's in charge of the renewal is literally their propaganda office. Their Ministry of Propaganda is in charge of whether or not Bloomberg gets access at all. So they go over there from time to time and they glad hand, and they have these smiley face meetings where they talk about, according to the Chinese government, they talk about cooperation between the U.S. and Chinese media. They talk about introducing China to the world. They talk about introducing Chinese stories to the world. And this is the type of stuff that should be a total outrage to people. And on top of that, Bloomberg filters so much of America's financial news. And so much of our financial news, we're getting people who are so willing to do business with a Chinese government that has concentration camps and is legitimately a racist. People call it Han supremacism. They have a supremacist culture. We're focused on supremacy in the United States, which of course, no one wants that. It's happening in China, and Bloomberg's out there saying what great guys they all are, while he's cutting these deals with them. And no one is outraged because why? He's one of the biggest Democrat donors. He employs thousands upon thousands of journalists. So who's going to dig into something like that? Clearly someone who doesn't want his money or his job opportunities. And I don't, but there needs to be more people like that to start putting pressure.
Alex, I'm not trying to make recruits to my turn off the media campaign here, but at the same time,
I got a mortgage, so not everyone can tune out.
That's right.
You people got to stay tuned in.
Like, why wouldn't people just, like, for example, hear what you're saying and at least say, wow, I'm not going to hook, line, and sinker dive in and make my social media rants anymore. Like, I'm not getting full truth. I'm getting filtered truth. Like, I hear you saying this, and to me, it's a no-brainer. Shut it off. Don't listen to it. Stop it. Or at least look at valid independent sources. What do you think?
Right. So I think the media is credible for the most part on things that are apolitical. And I think there's a lot of great journalists on topics that are not political. The problem is, and this has been incredibly depressing to watch this trend ever since Trump was elected, is that people are getting more topics are becoming political. Even the pandemic, which I go through in the book, there's a chapter called The Trump Virus, where I walk through how originally it was Republicans who were concerned about the virus. Breitbart reported on it in the first week of January in 2020, a mystery pneumonia coming from China. And then Tom Cotton, a couple of weeks later, called for a travel ban from China, which he was called xenophobic for that. And about a week after that, Donald Trump enacted the travel ban and was called xenophobic for that. But once it became clear that the media narrative could be that Trump was letting Americans down on the virus, then that's what everyone went for. And they're stuck with it to this day, where you see people who are double vaccinated wearing masks alone outside, even though the CDC says you don't have to. Why? Because it's a political statement. It's a talisman. It's a symbol that you are victims of the Trump virus to a degree. Not everyone. I know some people, there's some cases, I'll caveat it, that the masks work in some cases. I'm sure, possibly. Who knows? Whatever. I'm not a scientist. Don't listen to me on the science. Listen to the scientists on the science. And this is the whole point, is that everyone has to have a hot take on every topic with the political angle. And it's very dangerous because that does make the media worthless. If the media could just go back to reporting the truth, and we get it, they like Democrats. My side likes Republicans more, but not all Republicans. We could at least have some sense of balance. It's just gotten way out of whack over the Trump years. So I don't say tune out, but I do try to give you some tools where if you must consume the establishment press, here's what they're doing and how they're doing it. And I literally give a list, a bulleted list. Here is what they do, and here's how here's what to look for.
Oh, that's really good. I love that. Frank from Savannah, Georgia. What is the biggest threat our country currently faces?
Well, I think geopolitically, the answer is China, and I won't elaborate too much more on that. But I will say that the other topic that came up in these meetings that I document in the first big scoop from the book with Bloomberg is the Belt and Road Initiative. And this is their debt trap diplomacy infrastructure plan, where they get these developing nations hooked on cheap infrastructure deals. They're too good to pass up. Their offers too good to refuse. And they start going down this road and they can't pay China back. Then they're incredibly indebted to China. And that leaves China very safe in terms of any sort of diplomatic dispute or even military dispute. And this was something that came up with Bloomberg. I would love Bloomberg's perspective on what they said about this plan. But China is on the march, and they're part of this thing called the 100-Year Marathon. A guy named Michael Pillsbury wrote an amazing book about it. I also recommend. But they are trying to become the geopolitical superpower and displace America, but they're not doing it with this sort of military colonialism that you would think of as how to gain power. They're doing it with economic colonialism. It is making all of us economically dependent, and it's working. If you look at how much of our generic pharmaceuticals go through China, they come from China. It's like 90% of some drugs that are on most of our counters, they come from China. America and sometimes places in Europe generally are the places that develop these drugs. They work very well. They have a patent for 10 years or so, and then it's off, and then the patent comes out, and then China starts manufacturing the generics, and we buy those. And that's the thing. We're so hooked. I did this experiment last year where I tried to buy barbecue equipment made in America. It took me 2 hours, and I spent 4 times as much as if I had just gone to my hardware store and got the made in China crap. And
or went to Amazon or whatever.
It's irresistible. It's irresistible.
To
do it.
It is.
And that's how they've got us. And that makes us a little more less likely to be tough on them. So that's the biggest threat geopolitically. I think the biggest threat domestically is the extreme wokeification of America, where we're starting to question everything about the country, where there's no country that's so self-loathing as America at this time. There's a huge portion of the country that seems hell-bent every day to get up to prove America is a uniquely horrible place. One of the things that I break down in the book is the 1619 Project. I imagine if you're watching this live stream, you're aware of this, but for people it is New York Times, ostensibly reporters, but really activists, who were trying to paint a picture that America was a uniquely racist place and our true founding was in 1619. Historians, including African-American studies historians, have refuted key claims in the 1619 Project, which have been retracted, and yet it still is going to be part of curricula in our schools. That is not okay. And it's something that there is, I think, a lot of outrage. But even if you think there is a modicum of truth to what they're saying, I'm not saying there is, but these people on the far left, we're not going to be able to have a country if we keep talking about ourselves like we're a uniquely horrible place. And this effort by people, it's led by the celebrity class, it's led by LeBron James and people in the NBA. I like to joke about Michelle Obama talks about how She's worried about her kids getting pulled over and how it's tough being her kids, I guess, presumably because they have black skin and they're big victims, and she's concerned that they're going to be victims. They have a $65 million book deal, the Obamas. They're beloved by half of the country. They have a $100 million Netflix deal. They've got a Spotify deal. Literally half the country thinks they're royalty. Could you imagine how good they would have it if we weren't so racist? I would love to see how much Michelle Obama, then she could finally thrive if we weren't such a racist place. And these are the leaders of the people, and they do this. She's not joking when she talks about America's inherent racism. Dr. Fauci talking about America's inherent racism and systemic racism. He's been one of the most prominent public health officials for 30 years. He's a part of the system. He is the system. He's the single highest paid person in the American government. If the system's racist, he's at the top of the system. And this is said in the media without anyone pointing out how insane all these people are to say this stuff out loud. So I'm saying it out loud, and hopefully enough people agree, and you can get a signed book.
Yes, you can. Man, that phrase extreme wokeification actually sort of slightly woke me up a little bit when just by saying the phrase, because, and I don't mean woke up in the negative way you're referring to, but it brought to mind so many of my friends, because a lot of my news I get through friends, because I'm sort of unnewsed, if you will. But it so encapsulates where so many of my friends are, is they're so extremely woke, but the things they're saying, I'm like, man, you seem like the most uncredible source I've ever heard in my life. You're just ranting and ranting about how like your eyes have been opened and you understand the Illuminati now that's behind the scenes, and who the real president, who's really running the country. And they all seem to be experts. But you're right, at the same time, they're absolutely tearing down anything that even sounds like old America or values or hand over your heart for the pledge or saluting a military member.
And you're the themes you're bringing up, Danny, are really they're really crucial right now, because people are so disillusioned, and this is happening on the right and the left to a degree, where they really don't know who to turn to, and it's going to be a long way back. And I think you solve it by, if you read the book it has elements of it that are a how-to manual for what to do in order to sort of decipher the code of the New York Times article. So you kind of know what to really get out of the article, like what they're featuring and where, and you can start asking yourself the questions that they're not answering in the pieces, so you can get at least a little something out of it. But you have to have balanced approaches, and we really work on our credibility at Breitbart. And every time we make a mistake, people try to bust us for it. It becomes the lead story at the Huffington Post, and people threaten us. They try to cancel us constantly, and we've responded to that by being sharper, more accurate. 1,200 endnotes in the book to make sure that any claim you can go and check it out yourself. And you can go, if you want to take the time, you flip through and you can find it and look up the source. It's in there and confirm it on your own. We need to restore that, but we also, I think it behooves us to take a break from social media, because so much of it is noise. And I'm not saying don't use it. That'd be terrible for business for me. So use it a little bit. But it would be, but I do find it very off-putting a lot of the time. And it is good to take a walk in the woods and connect with family and to be with people in person, especially now the virus is winding down. And do a little bit of that this year, because we're so far out from the next election, and allow yourself to get involved in your community and don't think the whole world takes place on socials.
Yeah. I've been telling friends too, hey man, can we just get together in large, diverse groups like as often as possible now, so that we can really see what's real? I think that's such an antidote to constantly being fed what your reality is. It's like, hey man, go out with people. You'll find that, I mean, I live in the South. You would think that my whole state is riddled with racism, and until you turn the switch off and go out and have coffee with people, and you're like, nobody's mad, nobody's racist, everybody's having a great time. Like, relax. All right, let's go to Michael from Clearwater, Florida. I'm sorry, were you speaking?
No, I just think you're speaking. It's just a very anti-cancel culture message, which is inherently American. We're the land of the First Amendment, and we can't outsource the First Amendment to woke corporations. and to people who are really angry on social media. We need to defend it as
Yeah.
individuals.
Yeah.
We need to fight for it. And that includes having to deal with ideas you don't like and you don't want to be out there, and
Yes.
just debate them and beat them in the marketplace of ideas. It worked for us for so long. I don't know why we're
Right.
trying to throw it out all of a sudden.
Yeah, I mean, let's violently disagree and then get over to my house and sit at my table with my wife and children and let's have dinner. And let's. And who
I
cares?
heard you have many children. Danny.
I have four.
Many
I have four
children?
kids. Yeah.
Wow, good for you. I have at least two that I know of, and then I've got a book. This is almost like a kid.
Oh,
I gotta
yeah.
tell you, it's very similar. Wow, but good for you. 4. I
Yeah.
love that. I hope I get to 4. I really do.
Oh, you'll get there. Just got to, keep trying.
Happy to.
All
Sorry,
right,
honey.
Michael from Clearwater, Florida writes, Alex, you've become an inspiration to so many. I want to know, who was your inspiration or mentor in high school or growing up?
Oh, great question. So high school for me is when I discovered talk radio. I mean, I really have a great relationship with my parents, which always starts with that. And people who do not have great relationships with their parents are, it's a huge step back in life. And, most of us are not in full control over those things, but it really is helpful to me because I did build that trust. And one thing they did with me is they exposed me to a wide variety of ideas. They always made sure I went to the best schools. I went to a liberal but extremely prestigious prep school for high school. And then I went to a far left and prestigious college called UC Berkeley, which known for being a particularly wacky place, and it lived up to all the expectations. But I also was, when I would come home from school, there was always talk radio in the car. And I developed, an affection for pretty much everyone in mainstream conservative talk radio, and listened to them for dozens or hundreds of hours, maybe thousands in some cases. And that allowed the values to percolate without them being force-fed to me. I love that approach, and I think parents should have that with their kids. Get a lot of the deepest thinkers on topics, get their ideas into their heads, and then let them sort stuff out for themselves, and it'll keep them open-minded. And you'd be surprised at how well it works out, at least from my personal experience. But my number one guy, I will say, was Larry Elder. Larry Elder is a talk show host. He's in the Salem stations now. He shows up on Hannity's program a lot on TV, but he was my first talk radio love. I always thought he was the best. He had this libertarian mindset that really resonated with me when I was in high school, because I had an innate sense of, I've always had a little bit of an outsider streak to me and a questioning authority streak, but not in sort of a overly rebellious, like I've got to, get a spiky mohawk and get a piercing where I hang my nose to my ear, though I did consider that at one point. But
To prove your independence?
Yeah, exactly. I'm really independent. Let me get this piece of metal and hang it to this part of my face from here. Yeah, I never expressed myself that way, but he always really connected with me. I think both of us are more mainstream Republican now, especially now that the Republican Party has caught up on, I think, a lot of those key populist issues that we discuss a lot on at Breitbart. But at the time, I had a wide libertarian streak, and I thought he was fun and fast and smart, and he brought facts and arguments that were backed up with data, and I love that. And it was just not what I was getting in the classroom. And I liked my high school upbringing. I got a lot of great education, but there was a sense of a certain perspective was missing that was given to me by talk radio. But number one in high school, I would say, was Larry Elder. But in general, just put on, if you're a high school student, listen to everyone who's out there and let it marinate, and don't force yourself to draw conclusions too quickly. Don't feel like you have to have the answers to everything until you're well into your 20s. You even feel like you have to defend every position that you have. Get there, try to get there, but don't start defending positions you haven't fully formed. That's a big recommendation, is really let the ideas marinate and get as many of them as you can.
Love that. Herb from Aurora, Colorado asks, do you think America will ever be constitutionally secure, or is it going to be always a bloodbath like in today's times?
It's really an interesting way of framing it, and I'm concerned for the Constitution, and this is part of the reason. And I mentioned this throughout the book, and it comes up in the conclusion that I do recommend people check in from time to time with our founding documents, with the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, the Federalist Papers, because we were so blessed to get them. And they provided this framework that has done so much good for so many, and not just Americans, but the amount of philanthropy, the amount of benefit that American technology has provided people. American drugs have not hard drugs like pharmaceuticals have benefited people. And it's all of these things. America's military has been this incredible peacekeeping force throughout history, despite the fact that we're probably too many places at the moment. But in general, it's been a great peacekeeping force. And it's one of these things where this perspective, I think, is going missing in our current academic makeup we've got as a country. And it's kind of absent from our press. And it's certainly absent from our entertainment. And it's really tough to make super compelling entertainment about the Federalist Papers. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's going to be tough to do. So it is going to be on us to check in with it. And if we go too far astray, it's going to be really bad. The same way, I think we benefited greatly from being a Judeo-Christian society that's Bible-based. Not to say we shouldn't be tolerant of all sorts of views, be it if you're a Muslim, be it if you're an atheist, all that stuff, we should be incredibly tolerant. But having the country's guiding lights being those Judeo-Christian values, the Ten Commandments, this type of stuff is universal guideposts that are very beneficial for people. And they've worked so well. And we've kind of thrown out some of it. We've totally lost the spirit of the First Amendment. It seems like overnight. And that's horrible. And people online will make the case, well, the First Amendment's a constitutional issue. It's not it's about the government. It's not about corporations or about individuals. People can censor whoever they want to censor. Yeah, but was that the spirit of it? Was that really why it was written down? So that a bunch of super powerful billionaires could decide what's sayable and what's not on the public square? I don't think so. I don't think that's what the founders had in mind. So just thinking it through in that way, we always are going to have to defend it. It's hopefully not in a violent way. I disavow violence. But definitely they're going to need a major defense.
Leonard from Hallandale Beach, Florida. 2020 was a terrible year in terms of the pandemic and rioting, and 2021 isn't starting off any better. Do you believe that our country is on the brink of a civil war?
I don't. And I'll tell you, this is, we'll come back around to what I said about China. If you have the willpower to cancel Netflix, to cancel Spotify, to never use Google again, to never use Facebook again, to never use Twitter again, and to never buy products from China again, never buy another Nike product again. If you have the discipline to do all that stuff, then maybe I would buy that you're willing to take up arms and start shooting your fellow Americans. But we can't even do that. We can't even boycott a brands. We can't even boycott a brand from evil China. No, we're not going to start shooting other Americans anytime soon. We're so far away from that. It is, and again, just to clarify for the Soros-funded freaks, I disavow violence, and none of this is a suggestion that there will be violence anytime soon. No, I think we completely lack the willpower, even if it was the right thing, which of course is not the right thing at this time. But even if it was the right thing, it would not happen. There's no willpower to do it. If anything, we're too lazy at this time, and we need to start working on getting ourselves motivated to fight in the town square, figuratively speaking, for our values. So that's my first answer. However, there is a caveat, which is super compelling, which is the country bifurcating in a way where there's going to be much deeper red states and deeper blue states. It does seem like they're becoming havens for Democrats and havens for Republicans. You're seeing this exodus from our cities, and we're seeing people go to places like Texas and Florida, Tennessee, the Pacific Northwest to some degree, really kind of more, I guess more. What do we call the part of the country inland from the Pacific Northwest? A little bit, but still north, not the Midwest. The Middle East, the Middle West. I got to figure that out.
Midwest.
They like Montana, Wyoming, places like that.
Midwest, right?
There too. Is that technically the Midwest? Maybe it is. It's I guess maybe it's still the Midwest.
In addition to politics, I also don't know geography very well, so forgive me.
Yeah, apparently I don't either, but I've gotten this far. So, the point is that I'm very curious about these trends where people are fleeing to states where they're more comfortable politically, and whether or not that holds. And I don't know if it will, because the tax rate in red states is better, so that will enhance a certain number of Democrats to go there. And for me, I've always lived in Democrat areas because there's been more job opportunity there. And it's just, I don't know how that's going to go. That's a more interesting trend. If we really end up with like 27 solid red states and 23 solid blue states, and no states ever flip, what does the country look like at that moment? That's really interesting to me. I think we're probably too connected economically for any fighting to break out, but who knows?
You made a great point. It's like we stress out if a package arrives anything greater than 2 days. We're certainly probably not going to take up arms and shoot our neighbor.
That's
all right, Cindy.
It's a big step from there. It's a big step from there.
It's a large step to go from 3 to 99. Cindy from Fresno, California. We live in unprecedented times. Can you think of the 3 most toxic people who helped us get here?
Yeah, it's a great question. The 3 most that helped us get here. Well, it's wow. Barack Obama comes to mind because he was a historic disappointment to me. He had the opportunity to really unify the country at a number of times. Like I think back to the Trayvon Martin stuff, where the whole country was on fire, and they and he could have come out and said, this is not what the media is portraying. This was not some sort of a assassination of an innocent black boy. This was much more to the story. There was a fight that broke out. It's very unfortunate it ended this way. We are going to prosecute this to the full extent of the law and see where the chips fall on this. But instead, what he did is he went out and said, if I had a son, he would have looked like Trayvon, basically sending a signal that we all need to be a part of the victim narrative. Blacks have been victimized by the rest of society, which is, I think, a horrible message if it's true in this case, just because it does, even if this was some sort of a racial hate crime, to treat it as though it's the whole country versus one lunatic in Florida would have been wrong. But it turned out that wasn't even the story. George Zimmerman had his whole head ripped up in the back. And this is just emblematic because there's a fight, there's a scuffle. And I'm not saying who is right or wrong, and there's always gray area in this stuff, but I am saying that there were numerous times where Obama could have come out and said, this is not a racist country. This is a good place. We're all Americans. And that's what he did on the campaign trail in 2008, which is why so many Republicans and independents voted for him. But then he governed like a hardcore partisan Democrat. And I think that was the opportunity of a lifetime that was missed. And I really resent him for that, because it's not that he's just such a left winger, which he is. It's that I think he knows the truth and he still didn't go with it in those cases. In terms of the rest of the people who are dividing the country, it's hard not to go with, I don't want to get, it's such a good question. I wish I'd thought about this some more. It's certainly Hollywood's divided the country in a major way. Big tech has divided the country, and establishment media has divided the country. I don't know if there's another political figure powerful enough other than Obama who has really got us there. But but anyone, you think about people like the George Soroses of the world who fund every single anti-American cause, especially if it's in America, funding anything that makes America look bad. There's going to be, his money's going to be there. Anything that makes Israel look bad, you're going to find his money there. And it's one of these things where it is, that's not helpful, because when it becomes an industry to hate on America, that's a really bad trend. But I do think that a lot of these folks in Silicon Valley, they have unprecedented power, and they could use their power in the name of freedom. Instead, they use it in the name of censorship, in the name of leftism, and in the name of globalism, and in the name of making a bunch of money. So any number of people in Silicon Valley who are CEOs could qualify for that.
Yeah, and I still consider myself somewhat non-political. Maybe I'm more than I know, but you know, it seems like liberals have invested more in entertainment, in being cool, in being funny, in subtle ways. I mean, Saturday Night Live. You look at comedy stages. I don't know that I've ever seen a conservative comedian. They're out there, but most of the really funny guys are liberal. And I just wonder if that could be a cool strategy for people to invest in the entertainment world. And, you know, I feel like conservatives.
Is one of my favorite topics. And I think that there's a lot more comedians these days who are openly conservative, who are pretty good, which is a great development. And a lot of them are getting good platforms because comedy has to be subversive. It has to be counterculture, or it's not going to be funny. If it's, you can't have establishment comedy. It's just not. It just you can, and you can get paid to do a corporate gig and make a living doing that, but you're not going to push the envelope culturally. So I do think there's a big opportunity there, and I am seeing some people who are filling it, who do seem to be pretty openly conservative. But I do think that this needs to be a major effort, and I've been preaching this gospel for a long time. But if you're inclined, if you're a young conservative and you're inclined to go into the arts, to create entertainment, to go into the media, even to be an educator, I encourage you to do that before you think about being a political person. And because that's where we're lacking. We're lacking that sort of infrastructure and culture. And I think that the more we do that, it's going to take decades to catch up. But I do think that we need to. And I don't accept the premise that most of the cool people are liberal or most of the funny people are liberal. I do think that was the case, but now I think it's most of the cringe people are liberal. I mean, some of this stuff, some of these people who I used to think were brilliant, Sasha Baron Cohen comes to mind, who I thought was the funniest human being who ever lived when I was in high school and college watching the Ali G show. And I even forgave him for Borat, which was wildly anti-American, but it was so funny. It's like, if you're going to be that funny, fine, you can say whatever you want. And then he made Bruno, which I thought was also funny, but it made fun of Hollywood. So it didn't get good reviews because it was making fun of the wrong people. And then now he's just this guy raging about Facebook not censoring enough. This is one of the most talented people on the planet. It's such a disappointment that this is where he's spending his time these days. I think about it with Stephen King. I've read a dozen Stephen King books. Super talented person, obviously sold 1 billion books. His legacy is set forever. And he's just a generic guy who tweets horrible stuff about Trump now. It's just like boring tweets about Trump. He's one of the talented creators in the last 100 years in America. And this is what he's relegated to, the next guy tweeting stupid stuff about Trump. It's so uncool. It is so conformist. And this creates this huge void for the right to fill. And I hope we do fill it. But the last point to this, and you know I'm passionate about this topic, the last one I will say is, if you are someone with money, with means, you need to invest in this stuff too, because there's going to be a lot of trial and error. There's going to be a lot of voices who are going to try and fail. And there needs to be an industry for them to be able to give it a shot. And they're not going to be able to do it unless they feel like there's going to be a pot of gold at the end. And that's why conservatives need to vote with their dollars. And we're uniquely terrible about that.
Man, I still love your and appreciate your views on the entertainment industry. Sherry from Powder Springs, Georgia asks, what do you hope for the outcome of your book?
You know, it's a great question. The joke was the first hurdle is I didn't want to embarrass myself, meaning that I didn't want to get. The first thing was I did not want to get the book to bomb, needless to say, because there's a lot of great books out there. There's books I've read this year, and I swear I'm the only person who read it, and they're good books. It's tough to find an audience. So the first thing is to find a respectable audience. The second thing I wanted was to not get canceled. And the reason why I didn't want to get canceled for the book is because I wanted to get to publication date before the cancel mob got here, because I wanted people to focus on the ideas. And we're in this huge cancel culture moment where anyone can dig around and come up with some narrative where whoever you're looking at or talking about or thinking about is a bad person. And I would like to think I've been pretty careful, but I'm sure there's a narrative someone can come up with. And if they're going to do that, I wanted the book on the stands first. And we got to that day, which is a huge win, because now people are going to have to deal with the ideas in the book. Even if you don't like me, you don't like Breitbart, you don't like The Messenger, you've got to deal with it. The books are there, they're here, it's going to be here forever, and people are going to have to contend with it. So those two goals have been accomplished. Other than that, I do hope I change the way people look at corporations. And I do think that America's rugged individualism is part of our exceptionalism. The glorification of the unique American individual, charting out their own path, doing their own thing, bucking the system, bucking trends. That is what drove us to greatness. It's not corporations. And we have this culture now where we're so subservient to the corporations, where you've literally got people in these Silicon Valley corporations that are going to pay for women to freeze their eggs because they should give their 20s to the corporations and not to creating families. And by all means, women, if you want to do that, please, it is your right. You can freeze your eggs and work at, Google. Go for it. If that is your dream, please, by all means. I'm not telling you not to have that dream, but I would like us to think a second time before we start thinking the whole point of life is corporations, Netflix and Facebook and Apple. And can we work at a corporation? Are we using the corporations? It's so horrible and banal and boring, and we have to get out of it. And if this book can move us in that direction, then it'd be a big hit.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have. This has been so thrilling, and if I had my way, we'd spend many more hours just diving deep. We couldn't get to all these questions. There's, I don't know, maybe 100 more questions. But to order Alex Marlow's limited edition autograph book, go to premiercollectibles.com/Marlow. And whether you're a collector or lover of books, Premier Collectibles has the best-selling author-signed books that everyone wants. And if you want to be a part of the live signing experience with more of your favorite authors, follow Premier Collectibles on Instagram or Facebook. Alex, from all of your friends who've tuned in and from all of us here at Premier Collectibles, thank you so much for being here. This looks like a provocative book for today. How can people connect with you, follow you, and learn more about what you're doing?
Thank you. And I love the questions and a great conversation. It's really fun to have the whole hour to kind of articulate some of this stuff. There's big ideas in the book, and there's also breaking news that I'm thrilled to share with everyone. I've been sitting on some of this stuff for a while, and it's been really agonizing to wait for the book to come out. And we'll have a lot of the stories at Breitbart, but not all of them will be there. So I really do hope everyone gets it. If you want to keep an eye on what I'm doing, you can go to alexmarlow.com, and that has a link to all my socials and a place to keep up with me there. SiriusXM Patriot every morning, 6 to 9 a.m., Breitbart News Daily, where I host. And as always, my favorite thing is Breitbart.com, our front page. That's my baby, and I love it. And that's always the best place for all your news. And you can find all my social media platforms at my website, alexmarlow.com.
Very good. Well, Alex, thank you again. And for all of you out there, thanks so much for tuning in. Bye, everybody.